Hello and welcome again to the Squared Circle News Network. This is episode number 2. I am your host, Darren Patrick, and as always, I want to thank you so much for taking the time to click on this video. If you have already subscribed, I greatly appreciate it. If not, why not click on the subscription button? Also, give me a thumbs up, click on the like, and also the little bell. Let's not forget that one, because if you click on that, that's going to let you know every time I upload a new episode. And as I stated before, I haven't settled on a complete schedule yet, so these episodes can come out of nowhere right now, and it's best to be alerted as to when they go up as they go up. Topping today's Squared Circle News Network, we have some serious news coming out of World Wrestling Entertainment. It was announced that Brian James, better known as the Road Dogg, member of D-Generation X in a tag team with Billy Gunn, the New Age Outlaws, on this past Thursday night suffered a heart attack. They're still not completely known to what extent the damage has been done or exactly what's going on, but Brian's wife, Tracy, did take to social media and release the following statement. I want to thank everyone for the prayers and texts. Brian most likely suffered a heart attack late Thursday night after returning from Orlando. He has had tests run and we're currently waiting for the results. He has also seen a kidney specialist and will have a stress test done. He's always been on blood pressure meds for high blood pressure. Just please pray all the tests come back for something we can fix. I am a total wreck, but I'm trying so hard to be positive. Please pray for Brian. He feels horrible, and for God to please heal my husband so he can come home. Thank you all so much. Now, there is an update that took place following this initial statement, and Brian's wife, Tracy, says, just an update, Doc just came in, kidneys came back clear, and heart cath is scheduled for Monday, and they will determine then what's to be done. Please continue to pray for him and all his doctors and our family. Thank you all, and we love you all. Of course, all the best wishes to Brian's family and prayers for him to have a complete and speedy recovery. Brian, again, better known as Road Dogg, is a member of D-Generation X, is a longtime member of the WWE family. He works in creative right now as a producer, but this is something that you just don't want to see happen to anyone, no matter what your feelings on professional wrestling are, your feelings on preferences of brands or anything like that. Nobody deserves to go through this, and nobody's family needs to have this kind of stress and suffering. So all the best wishes, all the prayers, hopefully that Brian comes back healthy and can continue doing what he's doing. And even if he is at a point where maybe he needs to retire, so be it. At least he can live his life with his family and enjoy what time they can get together. Because as you all know, wrestling, professional wrestling in any capacity, be it in production, be it in writing, being in a talent, is an unbelievably demanding business. Very stressful, very time consuming. So any time that Brian can get with his wife is much deserved, and all the best to him. Also, in WWE news, I just wanted to touch on the fact that just this past Friday night SmackDown, ratings were up a little bit again, and they surpassed the 2 million mark. And the reason I'm bringing this up is because it just goes to show that even though this is a small increase, it just goes to tell you that there are wrestling fans out there looking for something to consume in the world of pro wrestling. They're looking for a quality product to watch. And being that the WWE's ratings have consistently dropped so drastically over the last several years, if not longer, this is just an indicator that the fans are out there. And if you work on getting them a better product, they'll come back. And here's hoping that at some point WWE can do that. I want to touch a little bit on what I started to talk about in episode number 1. And if you have not yet watched or listened to that episode, please, you can find it at my channel. Go ahead and click on that and do so. All your support is greatly appreciated. But I did indicate in episode 1 that I do have some not so fond feelings right now for the WWE, and I touched a little bit on my history and how I got started as a fan of professional wrestling and how long I've been a fan, and really how much I love talking about and watching professional wrestling and what a big part of my life it's always been. So I'm going to dive a little bit deeper today into my feelings for the WWE and why things have turned. And again, if you did not see episode 1, I talked about, being a fan of WWE literally from day one in the WWF when it all started, when the territories ended, the day that Vince McMahon decided he was going to take his product global, and the WWF became just everywhere. It was on TV nationwide, worldwide. Pay-per-view started, and it was a phenomenon, an absolute phenomenon. And at that point and on, and there were peaks and valleys in the fan followings and ratings historically, but from that day on, really when it all started, the WWF and professional wrestling was a whole different entity than what it had been previously. Vince McMahon made these characters larger than life superheroes, just absolutely just something that we could relate to. And I think mostly the reason why was because they drew their character storylines from reality. If you think back to the original really big WWF superstar was Hulk Hogan, and Hulk Hogan's character drew on what was going on in real life. He had feuds with the Iron Sheik and Nikolai Volkov. And of course, back at that time in the 80s, tensions were high with Russia. The Cold War was going on. And, we were literally living in fear that at any point there could be a nuclear war. And those storylines transitioned into the ring, and fans just became so passionate and just so proud of their being American. They just follow the red, white, and blue, and the professional wrestling, you get caught up in it, and sometimes. And as we talked about in the past before the internet with kayfabe, there were times when there certainly was questions as to what's real, what's not real, what's an actual thing happening in real life and what's not. And at that time, kayfabe was just such a strong standard that these guys lived their characters inside and outside of the ring, and really they made it their mission to make what they were doing as believable as possible. So you had the Iron Sheik and Nikolai Volkov, who were absolutely wonderful people in real life. And you can go back and you can go through YouTube and you can search just other wrestlers doing shoot interviews on pretty much anybody, any of these other characters that they worked with. And you'll find that everybody really just has so many good things to say about the Iron Sheik and Nikolai Volkov. They had their issues outside of the ring, substance abuse, things like that, especially the Iron Sheik. But, that was a time when could you find somebody in the entertainment world that didn't somehow get caught up in that? So you can't really judge their character on the mistakes they made in that realm. But I guess what I'm getting at is during this time when the WWF took off, these guys were absolutely hated for the characters that they portrayed. And whether it's fair or not, it was their job, and they did it to the absolute best of their ability, and they really had people wrapped up in the whole American and Soviet and Iranian storylines. It was just incredible. It was an outlet. It was a way for you to see Hulk Hogan, the real American, just this larger than life superhero, just getting into the ring and squashing the Russian and the Iranian, and it was American pride at its finest. And that's where it started. And the WWF at the time had such an amazing ability to lock on to playing off what was going on in the world and making it a part of their storylines. And that's really what made them as popular as they were. They had the talent that could back it up, and they had the storylines that could just get you so wrapped up and engrossed. And somewhere over time, they lost that, and that's where my kind of and disdain is kind of a strong word, but I guess it's a proper word, because I'm going to go over some things that really escalated my feelings towards this. But they kind of lost that, and they lost that into the early to mid 90s. I guess there was their first really big ratings drop, and they were struggling and they were hurting financially, and they hadn't been publicly traded yet. And eventually WCW taking so much of their ratings really gave Vince McMahon a kick in the ass, and really made him put on a product that you couldn't help but just get behind. It was exciting. It was rejuvenated. It was an injection that they needed for a long time, and they got it with the Attitude Era. You had guys like Stone Cold Steve Austin, The Rock, D-Generation X, just so many characters that were just pushing the envelope beyond edgy, and the ratings just absolutely skyrocketed into the millions. And it was at first, of course, a slow progression because the war between WWF and WCW went on for over a year. WCW was winning the ratings, and then finally the tide turned when Vince McMahon took the kid gloves off and really started going after getting his crowd back. And he did, and he was successful. And the big turning point for me was the day that WCW went out of business. And of course, Vince McMahon bought WCW. That's, history now. It's common knowledge. But what happened after that is really where my following the WWF, WWE, that turning point right there is what made me start losing interest. And that was because it seemed that when the competition was gone, when Vince McMahon had nobody to overcome anymore, and he was the only game in town, he was the only program to watch, he was the only show, he kind of lost any interest in working as hard as he was working to put on the product that he was putting on. And you can see it. And it's like I said, again, this is all my opinion, and this is what this situation did to me. But there's a lot of young first generation wrestling fans who the only wrestling product they know is the WWE in its current form. And again, if you're a fan of that, please, by all means, don't take what I'm saying as I'm trying to insult you or I'm trying to stop you from watching the WWE, because that's just not the case. To each his own. To everybody likes what they like, and I want everybody to be able to enjoy what they enjoy. So you stick with what you love. But I just want to point out how things changed, and it's very visible, because after the Attitude Era was the Ruthless Aggression Era, and there was still some good things there, but it was starting to water down and to trickle down into a completely different product. And it just continued and continued and continued until all the big stars who made the ratings the biggest they ever were in history just started to retire and go away. And then there came a point where after the John Cena, I look at as the last true WWE superstar. And after him, there really is no one of that magnitude, of a Rock, of a Stone Cold Steve Austin. I put Shawn Michaels in that category. Some people don't, because Shawn Michaels was not so much the Hollywood entity that everyone else was, but just he was a superstar within the confines of the WWE. But for my money, up until recent times, Shawn Michaels historically is the greatest wrestler of that time out of anyone. Nobody could surpass what he did in the ring and on the microphone as far as cutting promos. So what I'm saying is, John Cena being the last major superstar, I fully wholeheartedly believe that after Cena, Vince McMahon intentionally took away the ability of these performers, these athletes, took away their ability to reach that level of popularity and of stardom. And if you think about it, it makes sense, because, The Rock, Batista, Steve Austin, everybody managed to break into movies, into TV, into Hollywood. And that being the case, it took them away from the WWE. So even though Vince McMahon could make billions of dollars in merchandise off these megastars, he was losing the opportunity to have these guys in the ring to draw ratings. And Vince McMahon, I believe, just did not want to have his talent splitting time with other forms of entertainment anymore and taking away his revenue and taking away his ratings. And he started going on with these scripted promos, which is one of the biggest downfalls in pro wrestling, is taking away the talent's ability to speak for themselves, because so many of these guys were made in a moment. And if you think about what I'm saying there, Stone Cold Steve Austin, he was always a very solid wrestler. From the time he was stunning Steve Austin, uh, he was a solid performer, technically sound, but he was missing that character attribute that was going to take him from, a mid to upper level card wrestler to a megastar. And that moment was made when he defeated Jake the Snake Robertson, the King of the Ring, and he cut the Austin 316 promo. That one moment made Stone Cold Steve Austin, took him from that good worker to absolute megastar that was just a steamroller that nobody could stop. And that's just, and the same thing with The Rock. With The Rock, if you smell what The Rock is cooking and the people's eyebrow, that was his moment. And just little things take a character from mediocrity to superstardom. And Vince McMahon scripting these promos word for word and being in complete control of everything everyone says takes away that ability to have an organic moment where you go from being a mid-carder to a megastar. And that being the case is being that there's nobody that's ever going to reach the magnitude of these former superstars. Vince McMahon doesn't have to worry about losing anyone anymore to movies, to Hollywood, because frankly, I can't think of anybody on the WWE roster right now, with the exception of probably Roman Reigns. Roman Reigns has got a very unique look, and he's come to a point now where his character is a heel, which it should have been for a long time. Vince McMahon tried to force Roman Reigns as a babyface down everybody's throats, and we kind of all know how that went. So, but I don't, as good as Roman Reigns can be, I don't think he's ever going to reach the level of a Cena or a Rock, because even though he still has that look and he still is making that transition into movies and things like that, he still is not given the opportunity to be himself. And that's, I think, where things go from having that organic ability to excel to being controlled to a point where Vince McMahon at any point can take away his character's exposure, can take away his, the head of the table, the whole gimmick. He can water that down to the point, if he sees that Roman Reigns is getting too popular. We all know Vince McMahon has no qualms about just crushing those moments that the fans lock onto. And a perfect example that I like to draw to is probably the best example that anyone can think of, is Miro, formerly Rusev in the WWE. He came out with Aiden English, and he just out of nowhere made the whole Rusev Day angle, and it just exploded. For what reason, I don't know. It was the right angle for the right person. It was the right storyline for the right person. And you could not keep the Rusev Day t-shirts in stock. And it was just, people were chanting it like crazy. Even if he wasn't even in the ring yet, you just heard the Rusev Day chants, because that's what the people wanted. And Vince McMahon killed it. He killed it. He buried Rusev to the point where he just put him in these ridiculous angles with his wife, this whole cuck angle that just it 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 didn't belong anywhere in wrestling. And it was an intentional move on Vince McMahon's part to destroy the Rusev character, to stop the organic explosion, to stop the popularity, and therefore Rusev could never in the WWE reached this level of notoriety that others had in the past. So this was blatant. It was absolutely blatant. And there's been other examples of this. But being that part of the business, that's part of what drew me away from the WWE. Bigger than that is the fact that Vince McMahon stopped caring about talent and started caring more about just how much money he could put in his bank account. And don't get me wrong, I'm not saying that if you own a business you shouldn't do whatever you can to make as much money as you can, because God only knows things can change at any point. You can go from feast to famine at any time, and you want to make sure that your family, everybody involved with you is taken care of. And I don't have a problem with wanting to make money and making money, but at the expense of other people, at the expense of what your fans are looking for, you're pretty much ignoring what people are asking for. The people that are putting money in your pockets, the fans that are buying the merchandise, buying the pay-per-views, ordering the network, tuning in week after week, adding to your ratings. You're blatantly telling them, I don't care what you want to see. You're going to take what I give you and you're going to like it. And if not, move on. I don't care. And that's another big part of it, because there just got to be a point where I couldn't figure out why I was watching Monday Night Raw anymore. And I do pay attention and tune in now, because it wouldn't be fair for me to do this channel and make the comments that I make without paying attention, without knowing what I'm talking about. So I get through it. I watch, and it's difficult a lot of the times because I just can't get wrapped up in these storylines. But I do it because it's the fair thing to do. Now, the biggest part of my problem with the WWE and what Vince McMahon has done is his. I want to figure out the right way to word this, because it should be said harshly, but I don't want to take it someplace where it's going to get really ugly. But Vince McMahon has very little concern for human life. And I'm going to go back to 1999, May 23rd, 1999, the Over the Edge pay-per-view, where um, WWE great Owen Hart lost his life when he fell from the top of the arena because of a faulty rig that was supposed to lower him to the ring, and he was pretty much killed instantly when he hit the mat. And I know there was a slight moment when they were taking him out of the ring when he was still alive, but there was no coming back from that. And this was probably less than midway through the pay-per-view. And the absolute right thing to do at that point should have been to cancel the show, make a statement. There's not a person in the world that wouldn't have understood. Nobody would not have understood. You lost a member of one of the most prestigious wrestling families in the history of pro wrestling, in just an absolutely tragic, ugly accident. And there was no reason to continue that show, and Vince McMahon did. And I can't think of any good reason to continue that show. I can't think of one single solitary reason why that show should have went on, but it did. And so be it. And at that point, now this is a lot of years ago. This is 1999. This is over 20 years ago, and I was younger. I wasn't a kid, but I was young enough where you're sitting with a group of people and you're watching this pay-per-view, and you're dealing with what just happened, and you don't know how to react to it, and you don't really judge at that point, or make an opinion based on the fact that they decided to continue the show. You just went with it, because what else do you do? To think back on it now, it should have never gone any farther than that. It should have ended, and some respect should have been paid, and there was just a million better ways to handle it than the way it was handled. On the same topic of really choosing the money before human life, WWE has this agreement with Saudi Arabia and the Middle East of doing these super shows, and they've been put on hold because of the pandemic. But they do these shows, and they get paid a great deal of money from the Saudi Arabian government to make these shows happen. And first of all, the smallest part of this is the shows themselves are just really garbage. They're not they're they're not by any means a show that would fly in the United States at any point. And the fact that you can watch them on the network is in the U.S. I guess there's no way around that, but they're just they're there's very little good that's said about these shows. You've had the death of the Fiend, so to speak, and I say that tongue in cheek because this is a character that should have been one of those organic characters that really took off and been a long-term superstar. And just because, for whatever reason, Vince stepped in and didn't want him to have that level of popularity, he pretty much lost everything to Goldberg during one of these Saudi Arabia shows. But the big thing that I'm getting here uh, at this point is with these Saudi Arabia shows in 2018. Washington Post journalist, an American journalist of Middle Eastern descent, Jamal Khashoggi, on October 2nd, 2018, was executed in the Middle East by the Saudi Arabian government for speaking out against what he believed was wrong with the Saudi Arabian government. Executed. Imagine this. In the streets, on camera, for all to see. Someone representing the United States media was executed. I can't think of any reason why the plug wasn't pulled on every single one of these shows. Take this Saudi prince's money, tear his check up, throw it in his face, pack your people up, and leave. And Vince McMahon decided that the money was more important than this journalist's life and decided to keep running these shows. And just absolutely despicably disgusting. I don't understand. Again, like I said, you have a business and you want to be as successful and financially secure as you can. But there comes a point when right and wrong are just the line is just goes beyond blurred. And Vince McMahon not only blurs it, but he just tears the line up and just forgets it's even there. Because that money is just so important to him that the lives don't matter. And that's really the biggest part of the reason I feel the way I do against the WWE. It's just you've got to think about sometimes human life is more important than how much you're putting in your pocket. The WWE had a record year in revenue this past year. They made more money in 2020 than they ever have in their history. And amid that huge year of revenue, they made so many cuts to not only their rosters, but their production team, their referees, everyone across the board. Not a single job was safe. And they did this in a year when they could have afforded to not only pay everyone for their work, but to give them probably a decent bonus so that they could survive working less dates than they normally would be with the way the pandemic affected everyone. They just didn't care. They wanted to make the money. Money equals more important than human life and human well-being outside of the McMahon family. And that, friends, is why I feel the way I do towards the WWE. And if you have opinions on this, again, the only thing I ask in this channel is be respectful. I do the best that I can to present my opinions in a way that I don't force anything on anybody. I speak truthfully, and I just want you to understand where I'm coming from. And hopefully you'll like something you'll see here, and you'll be a long-time subscriber. Even if I say something that you disagree with, I'm not trying to do it in a way to push you away. I want to stir up conversation. I want to stir up interaction. So take that for what you will. I mean, I'm sure I'll go into more detail on things as time goes by, but I just wanted to put that out there because I wanted to be fair. I made that statement in episode 1 about the way I feel about the WWE right now, and I just wanted to be a little bit more explanatory as to why that is. So I'm going to move on a little bit here. I'm going to move over to AEW. And there's a report via the Dave Meltzer and the Wrestling Observer newsletter that Dega, Impact superstar and also former Lucha Underground Trios champion, is in talks to signing with AEW. The important thing about this is Dega is the husband of Tessa Blanchard, former Impact World Champion and Knockouts Champion. Now, Tessa Blanchard has been out of action for a long time since she dropped the Impact World title. She's been on hiatus, and she's been the subject of a pretty significant racial accusations. A lot of talents of color have come out and made statements on social media about some of the things that Tessa Blanchard has said backstage that are, if true, just pretty ugly racial comments. And this, absolutely beyond a shadow of a doubt, has affected the fact that she is not signed with anyone since leaving Impact. And the word through Dave Meltzer and the Wrestling Observer is they're looking at Tessa Blanchard's perceived value. In other words, Tony Khan needs to, I guess the first and most important part of this would be meeting with talent backstage and finding out everyone's feelings on signing Tessa Blanchard. Because now this is a perfect example of what I was getting at before. If this was Vince McMahon and this meant a huge dollar amount for him, it wouldn't matter what anybody thought. He would sign her. But Tony Khan is he's a smart enough owner where he's going to approach this carefully. And as I said, I think the most important step is meeting with talent and pretty much everybody involved in the production of the show and seeing how everybody feels about this. And we don't know for sure what is true is what has been said about Tessa Blanchard. Again, this is all speculation. A lot of statements and accusations made on social media, but no sure way to know what's true and what can be proven and what can't be proven. But usually where there's smoke, there's fire. And even if all the accusations aren't true, there may be some nugget of truth floating around in there somewhere where if she did take part in this will definitely hurt her stock. But again, Tony Khan will do his due diligence and do what he needs to do to again address her perceived value. And if this is something that he believes that everyone can get past, then of course he's going to sign her. It'd be foolish not to. If you can get Tessa Blanchard a clean slate and put all these things behind her and get her in a healthy mental state in a new locker room and make sure that this kind of thing, whether or not it did happen in the past, is completely squashed and doesn't happen again, and she does what she needs to do to make apologies or to make herself accessible to other talent to discuss what's been accused and what's been alleged and what's true and what's not true, and to put it to rest and to put it behind her. She's a human being. She deserves a chance. Everybody gets second chances for a lot of things. You know, people go to prison for murder. People go to prison for rape, and a lot of them don't make it out of prison. A lot of them make it out of prison and wind up going right back. But what I'm getting at is you can do bad things and you can turn your life around. You can find the good inside yourself. You can find, anything to make yourself more productive and better than you were in the past. And I think a lot of people forget that this is ugly. Racism is an ugly subject, and you would think that we're at a point right now in society where it wouldn't be an issue anymore. But I think the fact of the matter is it's at some level, it's always going to be out there. And I guess what I'm getting at is, as ugly as it is, there's a lot worse things that people have gotten past in their lives and made themselves better people after. So I believe that she at least deserves a chance to be made better. to make herself better, rather. And if you can do that, you'd be foolish not to sign Tessa Blanchard, because she is regarded as one of the top women's wrestlers in the world, and she would instantly add so much more credibility to your women's division. And AEW's women's division has been under fire completely for their first year of existence, and even longer. And they're finally getting to a point where they're getting it together. They've got Thunder Rosa, they got Britt Baker, has come a long way in a short period of time. They've got Chris Statlander and Shanna, and a lot of talents that are finally coming into their own and making this a division that's more respected in the world of professional wrestling. And Tessa Blanchard could definitely, if she's on her game, if she's doing the right thing, she could definitely be a positive influence and have a positive effect on this division. So if she can get this all together, then good for her, and I would love to see her sign. And her husband Daga, I don't want to have him swept under the rug, because he's not quite as well known in the overall world of professional wrestling that Tessa Blanchard is. But if he deserves a shot and they can work a program together or come into AEW together, then by all means, the more talent, the better. There comes a point where you've got to draw that line and say, we need to either expand our shows or something. You don't want to over drench yourself in talent. It's not so much bad for your show, because you can always find the best in what you have and put on a show. But there comes a point when it's not good for talent, and the WWE is a perfect example of that. They've got the biggest roster in the world of wrestling, and so many guys just sit off camera and don't get a chance to participate in anything, because there's not only too much roster, but the WWE just doesn't use their roster the way they should. They use such a small portion, and so many guys just don't get an opportunity. So, they're not at that point yet in AEW. They still got room. They still got a chance to have a lot of productive people. So if they can get these two and make them a crucial part of the product, an integral part of the product, then by all means, I'm all for it. Also in AEW, on this past episode of Dynamite, John Silver wrestled a match with Darby Allin. It was for the TNT Championship, and Silver took a spot where he went through the guardrail and wound up separating his shoulder. And he released on social media that it's not as bad as originally thought. He did have a shoulder separation. Does not look like he's going to need surgery, but he's probably going to miss several weeks of action, I'm sure he'll still turn up on Being the Elite. He's an integral part of that. Here's a guy that just came literally out of nowhere, had the personality. He just does everything right. He's a small guy, no doubt about it. He doesn't have the massive size that a lot of wrestlers do, but so powerful. He can do things in the ring that he belongs there. He belongs with anybody they put him in the ring in, because he is strong enough to manhandle just about anyone, and he doesn't ever look out of place. But just want to wish him a speedy recovery, because he's such a great part of Dynamite and part of Being the Elite that you hate to see somebody's push, somebody's momentum get derailed like this because of an injury. But just all the best to John Silver, and here's hoping that he can get it together and be back on TV soon. I'm going to finish off this episode with just a small bit of New Japan news. Actually, a couple small bits of New Japan news. First of all, it was released through New Japan's website that they are redesigning their world title belt. And I don't know how I feel about this yet, and I probably won't know how I feel until I see the actual product, because the current IWGP World Heavyweight Champion, in my opinion, is probably the most beautiful belt in pro wrestling. It just really is a stunning, stunning belt, and it's got a lot of tradition and pedigree behind it, and I'm not really a fan of changing tradition like that. I believe, just like in sports, when teams change their logos and their colors and things like that, if you built yourself on that original look, then why not stay with it? Why change it? But it's going to be a wait and type C thing for this belt, because I'm not sure how I'm going to feel, but we'll see. We'll give it a shot. They did. As far as I know, they are merging the world and intercontinental titles, which I guess if you were going to eliminate a title, I guess I would be more apt or receiving to see them remove the never open weight title before the intercontinental title. But they are in the process of having the last few champions have carried both belts, and there's really no sign of them separating the belts. So I'm anticipating when they release this new world title belt, that's going to signal the end of the intercontinental title and mostly signify a merging of the two. So we'll have to wait and see where that goes. And lastly, just a real, and to me, I find this interesting because this could potentially tie in with the open door policy, the forbidden door being kicked open between AEW and all these other wrestling organizations. Most importantly, New Japan, because I think uh, a talent swap between New Japan and AEW would be just absolutely unbelievable and groundbreaking and game changing, and could signal a new guard in the world of professional wrestling. But more on that in a future episode. I just wanted to talk briefly about on Friday, April 9th in Tampa, Florida at WrestleCon. Jay White is going to be making an appearance. And this is interesting to me because Tampa, Florida is really not that far from Jacksonville, Florida. And being that this forbidden door is kicked open, I would absolutely love to see Jay White in an AEW ring on Dynamite. And you know what? Maybe not. I don't want to think this because I'm not sure how much sense this makes either way, but he could also conceivably appear in Impact. And look, I'm not going to bash Impact, but what I will say is they are a much smaller organization. They just are. They don't have the production quality of a WWE or an AEW. They don't have the financial backing of a WWE or an AEW. But I just think Jay White appearing on Dynamite would be so much more of a big deal than him showing up on Impact. And I know that it may be more likely that he turns up on Impact because, he just, oh, God. I want to see him. I would rather see him in an AEW ring. I'm sorry, I'm stuttering, but I think it would be a waste to put him in Impact. But there could be a chance that he does show up on Impact because he does have feuds going with some of the talent that is crossing over between Impact and New Japan. So I guess it's possible. You have Juice Robinson and David Finlay, who just won the tag team titles from the Good Brothers in Impact. And on top of that, David Finlay defeated Jay White in the New Japan Cup in New Japan Pro Wrestling just not long ago, just this month. So there's a good chance that Jay White shows up in Impact and he does somehow interfere with Finlay and Juice Robinson and possibly cost them the tag team titles. I don't know. It's just speculation right now. But being that he's in Florida, I would love to see Jay White to show up in Dynamite. And if you're not I know I talked about New Japan in episode 1. And if you're not completely familiar with New Japan or is in depth to really understand these characters, Jay White is probably New Japan Pro Wrestling's biggest heel and just so good at it. So talented, so good at everything he does, and to imagine him in an AEW ring with some of the talent that they have there right now, I guess in the big scheme of things, it makes more sense for him to be in the ring with the Finlay in Impact, but I just have so much more in mind for him, and we'll just have to wait to see how it plays out. Basically, what I'm getting at is he's going to be in Florida on April 9th, and that's a Friday. And of course, you got, an AEW show the Wednesday before, the Wednesday after. You've got Impact on Tuesday. Who knows? He could show up. He's in the area. Why not? The Forbidden Door is open. Let's see where it goes. So I'm going to sign off for there. Again, thank you so much for being a part of this with me. Thank you for tuning in. Thank you for clicking on the video. Smash the like button. Subscribe. Hit the bell notifications and just stay on this journey with me. Let's see where we can take this. Thank you again for watching. Be good to each other and be good to yourselves. Thanks.